Today, we are excited to welcome India Birdsong Terry. India took the wheel of Greater Cleveland RTA as Chief Executive Officer and General Manager in 2019. Her impressive career began by serving Chicago Transit Authority for almost 10 years, and from there she took her seat as the Nashville Metropolitan Transit Authority's, which was rebranded as WeGo in 2018, Chief Operating Officer starting in 2015, where she was an instrumental supporter of the city's 25-year growth plan. She served there until joining Greater Cleveland RTA, where she has been guided by 15 years of prior public transit experience. She is also committed to giving back to the community. She is a member of the American Public Transportation Association and Transit Cooperative Research Program, serves on the board of the United Way of Greater Cleveland, the Transportation Learning Center, the Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Urban League of Greater Cleveland, and has served as board advisor for the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials. We are also proud to call her a board member of CLC and a graduate of Leadership Cleveland 2022. Please welcome India.
Hello, thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? If I can get a thumbs up? Okay, good. You guys are all in Hollywood Square, so I have a lot of folks I'm talking to. Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it. And thank you for kind of listening to me in advance for the next 15 minutes or so is what I'm told. As was mentioned, my name is India Birdsong Terry. I serve as the general manager and CEO for the RTA here in Cleveland, Ohio. I just wanted to say thanks again for sharing your time. I did ask for a roster a week before, a day before, and then this morning I'm a little bit type A. So I appreciate all of you dialing in, and I can see all of your faces as well. So thank you for the support. I'm super excited to be here with you today to be able to really give you like a truncated version of the state of RTA. So a lot of folks have seen or been around RTA for a while, whether you're here in Cleveland as a native Clevelander, or you're here through a boomerang, as I understand it's called, or you're here new to the city. We really are a staple of mobility, not just for being able to get around, but also being an equalizer, I think, in the idea of mobility and access and opportunity. So I know a lot of you represent organizations that are either nonprofit, for-profit, or either entrepreneurial in spirit, and I think RTA actually embodies all 3 or 4 of those areas. What do I mean by that? We've really taken a look at revamping how we are introducing ourselves to the city and the county of Cuyahoga. Understanding that our ridership is varied. We do not have a monolithic type of rider. It definitely is important to understand that we have to approach ridership as a community service provider. We are rooted in public service. We should not, kind of fall into the isms, if I can say that, right? Ageism, racism, abilityism, so to speak. We've got to make sure that we have paratransit services on time, safe, get you to where you need to be. We've got to have big bus, as we call it, the 40-footers or the accordion kind of 60-footers, BRT, rail, light and heavy, ready to go at a moment's notice. We also pattern ourselves after some of the best in the industry. I like to be able to think that we can take a national perspective of how transportation works, not only thinking about what works for Cleveland, but what's going to work for us down the pike as well. I see we have some folks on the line that are also outside of Cleveland. So shout out to Chicago, as well as I saw a couple of folks on there. I appreciate that. As you guys may know, I'm originally from Chicago. I have traveled a little bit. So being in Cleveland since 2019 has really given me an opportunity to really understand the intricacies of the Midwest. That being said, how are we reaching out to the community? We have totally revamped how we handle workforce development here at RTA. Hopefully you'll see that. We actually have hired more than 400 people in 2023. Now, understanding that we have an entire workforce of 2,300 speaks volumes. So people say, well, how are you doing that? How are you going back out there? Why aren't you in this kind of cut mentality of service that a lot of our counterparts are experiencing after COVID? Our chief operating officer came in my office, Doc Caber, if you guys may know him, Flante, and said, okay, what are we going to do? We may have to be in a situation where we have to cut service. And I said, well, the answer to that is no. Let's figure out how we can back into it, right? So we said, what's the problem? Workforce and manpower was the issue. If you travel around the United States, you will hear over and over again that everyone's having a hard time hiring people, right? I'm seeing a lot of nods going on as well. A lot of that has to do with how we present ourselves to the community. It's not that we have the magic ball. We don't have the perfect arithmetic or algorithm to solve the problem, but we had to look introspectively. We had to look at ourselves and how we actually present ourselves on a daily basis to the greater Cleveland community. And we realized that we're not in the right places. We took too long to be able to weave people through our red tape of being a quasi-governmental entity, right? I should see a lot of heads nodding on that. Our incentive packages may not have been advertised in the way that was most advantageous to getting more people understanding that we're more than buses and trains. You saw that in the tagline for today. We have engineers. We have an entire legal department. We've got facilities maintenance and fabricators. We just don't operate and clean the trains and buses, which is an absolutely admirable position, but we have a lot of other areas that need to be filled as well. And you never know what someone's passion may be. Just because they start out in one area of the business does not mean that that's their end goal. I started out as a planner within transportation, but who knew that I would be in this seat? So I wanted to take advantage of being able to understand everybody's passion. That being said, we will go anywhere there are people. If you are human, we will be there, right? So we'll go to the trailer parks. We'll go to the community rooms. We'll go to the school system. We got to start them early. All of that being said, that led us to where we are now, where we actually have waiting lists on our TP or transit police force. We've changed the way that people look at RTA, and we have a lot of work to do. We had to understand too that our pay also has to be revised. We had our first in 25 years compensation study. Now that's a little bit of inside baseball, but that means a lot as far as understanding how we compare to the market so that folks feel valued at RTA, and hopefully that translates to our customers. We also are looking at being able to kind of reach back out into the community and play a big part in being an economic driver of how our neighborhood is shaped. So as a planner, I'm a planner by trade, I might have mentioned that, an urban planner, right, that's done a couple other different things in economic development. I understand that mobility is crucial to connecting people to opportunity. So what does that mean? As we start to think about transit-oriented development, if you have heard about it, please put it in the chat. If you know what I mean when I say TOD, just put TOD in the chat or raise your hand so I understand. Thank you. So that being said, there's a lot of development going on. Cleveland has a history, from what I understand and what I have observed, of putting plans together, but maybe some of them work, some of them don't. We have a lot of intelligent people in Cleveland, and we've got to actually actionalize what we think about. So that being said, RTA has to be at the table. We have to be able to be there at the ground decision-making to understand how wide a street has to be, where the bus is, where the train stations are. The things that we do for a living set the pace for generations to come. So thinking of how we are going to revamp our downtown. People ask me all the time, do you care where the Browns are? I say, as long as there's a station there, that's what I care about, right? Making sure that people are actually connected, and we're prepared for that. So we are at the table when it comes to TOD decisions. We actually own quite a bit of property, and a lot of people don't realize that as well. So we have actually stood up a real estate department in RTA. Yes, there is a real estate department. I see some eyebrows going up. And what does that mean? That means that we can proactively work on those relationships. We have small tracts of land, typically, that may or may not be used. If you have a manufacturing site that is looking for expansion, we typically have a piece of property that can connect you to some other area. So that means that we play a role in whether or not that particular industry expands and provides jobs. Then we have to think about those tracts of land that are making the newest Walmart, the newest Amazon plant, the newest condominium and high rise. We want to make sure that we have access to those sites as well, so that we're ahead of the curve and we are not reactively trying to put in a bus stop. We are talking with those developers early and often, and more than likely, it's a small purchase that makes a difference in providing hundreds of jobs. We're seeing that in Ohio City, we're seeing that on the east side, the west side, and then also out in the fringes. That being said, we also have to think about, what do we tell ourselves as far as being available to people? And what do I mean by that? We have a lot of programs that actually are touting the work that we're doing that draw people to Cleveland from other areas, right? So I mentioned some of the folks that might be on the call that may not hail from Chicago originally, or if at all. We have to put on our best self every time. So part of that also includes rehabbing our facilities. If you have seen the paper lately, you might hear about a small project that is the rail car replacement. Rail car replacements, for those of you who may not be aware, our rail line, you might see it out in Shaker, you might see it downtown. Those rail cars are more than 40 years old. And when you think about the life expectancy of a rail vehicle, it should tap out probably around 25 years. So we are more than beyond our expected life. We've rehabbed them several times. We've done bubble gum and duct tape as much as you can think of, right? And being able to really think about using them to the extent of their capability. But now it's time to replace. That being said, that's the best opportunity to be able to capture on people or capitalize on people coming back from COVID, coming back to work, coming into a renovated downtown. If we look at the lakefront, if we look at Tower City, there's a lot of conversations about making sure that Cleveland can compare to other cities, and that's part of it. So we have what's looking at right now a 393 total package project for replacing our entire rail fleet. That is underway. We are more than 85% of the way toward that budget. We just went over that this morning. It's hedging toward 400 million, and we are really looking at probably well over 350 in the bank. That makes a huge difference. 2 years ago, we were not there. We have design completed. We're working with Siemens, just as information that is public knowledge. We will be having the best and the newest rail car fleet available for our current year. The first rail car should be coming on Cleveland soil in summer of 2026. So what does that mean? We now will have a common car that's flexible between light and heavy rail. We'll have both side boarding. We're also redoing our infrastructure to make sure that those cars have interior bike racks, that those cars have cameras, those cars have the latest in fare technology. That being said, we're also looking at fare capping. If you're not aware of what fare capping is, it's an equity measure that's put in. It's baked into your fare system. So you have a lot of smart cars that are out there. That's been around for a long time. Cleveland is behind the curve on that. We had to revamp our entire technology division. We basically split it in half, where we have a software and a hardware division. Those two entities work together underneath operations and procurement to make sure that we can move efficiently, faster, and more comprehensively so that we can work on projects years in the future and not just what we need right now. That being said, for example, going back to the rail cars, that technology will take us from almost 50 years ago to 2026. By the end of 2028, 2029, we should have our entire rail fleet completed and replaced. So that means that all of the lines that you may have seen when we were CTS 40 years ago will completely look different. Your children and potentially your grandchildren will be looking at those cars. Hopefully when your grandchildren are here, we'll have another iteration coming out. We don't want to wait that long. We have actually pledged to put $10 million annually from our own budget into the rail replacement program. So we're making a commitment that we have to be able to pay to play, right? We can't go out and ask for money if we're not willing to do that same thing ourselves. And that's something that I don't know that our industry has been great at. Part of it is also knowing what you're good at and what needs a little bit more work. So that being said, we're also looking out into the community and trying to hear from our customers a little bit more. Another inside baseball tip is that we are looking at KPIs. For those of you who are aware of that, those are key performance indicators. It sounds like a very old school thing to do, but again, transportation is not the best at doing that, right? We've got to make sure that we understand what our goals are. It's not just a strategic plan that we put on the shelf. We are looking at it monthly. That being said, I can tell you what our average customer looks like. I can tell you how much they make, are they male or female, what their general demographic looks like, what area of the city they're in, what their age is, what do they feel safe on the system, what systems do they normally use, are they on our paratransit, are they on our BRT, what time of day, all of that information, that granular information rolls into something that's called a NPS. For those of you who are aware of an NPS, please show your hand. Okay, so an NPS is a net promoter score. I know I'm getting a little techie or a little nerdy, so just roll with me for a minute here. But the NPS is basically your Yelp review. I know everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say that. Okay. So how often or how likely are you to actually recommend RTA to someone else? So a lot of that has to do with your experience on the last ride you took, right? So if you went to the Guardians game and it was great, it was awesome, it was on time, no problem, you probably have an NPS that's pretty high. And you say, hey, this is great. Think about it like an Uber trip. And that's not a 4-letter word. We're all mobility, so that's okay. That necessarily will influence your potential to take that trip with RTA on your next ride. So when you're thinking about, do I want to pay $50 to park or do I want to pay $250 for a trip on RTA? If that NPS score is pretty high, you might take the shot, right? But if you have a terrible experience, you're not prepared, you don't know how to pay your ticket, somebody cursed you out on the way and you couldn't get an answer, the signage wasn't right, you're probably not going to take it. That's one piece of our KPI dashboard. We actually are working toward hopefully understanding what the customer needs. And right now, it's not rocket science. Cleanliness, on-time performance is actually pretty good. Cleanliness, safety and security, and also ease of use are at the top. So what does that mean? We want to make sure that our TP or our transit police force is out there doing their job every day. That's beyond just standing there and saying hello. We want to make sure that we're responsive. We have the best of technology. We actually have the body cams. We're looking at drone technology. We're actually going out there, making sure that we're out in the community. Our police chief has been with us about 3 years. Her name is Deidre Jones. I am super proud of the work that she and her team have been doing to just totally revamp the way that we look out into the community. We had an average and had a great force, have always had that, but we're working from a posture of positivity. So we have a civilian oversight committee, for example, that's able to help us through the discipline process so that we hear from you. An example of our community investment is we had about 15 community events that our TP staff, our police staff, was going out into the community every year. So that could be your local Touch a Truck event for kids. That could be going to a holiday event. That could be going on a heart walk. We were averaging about, say, 15 or 16 events on an annual basis. We now are near 200 annual events. That's humongous. So that kind of transformation of making sure that our command staff and our lieutenants and our sergeants are seen, they're heard, and we also have a diversity of officers means a lot when it comes to folks understanding that we're approachable and we actually are here for you the same way that your CPD would be. That also helps keep our numbers down when it comes to incidents on the bus or the train. We cannot help who ride. We are a public service, so that means we have a plethora of personalities, mental health issues going on, as well as economic strata. But we are here to make sure that we can help get folks connected to the resources that they need. We have a transit or ambassador team. That particular team right now is staffed up with about 16 ambassadors that are, they go out in pairs. They actually are connected and report into our TP staff through policing. So they have access to all of the resources that you would get with an officer. We are trying to be able to help people before we get to an arrest. That typically does not happen very often, but when it does, we want to make sure that we've given you every opportunity to get the resources you need, which might be the impetus for the action, right? As to why we're there. There's a lot of questions as far as the unhoused population and how that's affecting people's ride. We have taken that seriously. We're working with the city and the county, but we don't wait. We do not wait to be able to intervene. And that's part of that transit or ambassador. They're just not ambassadors. Let me mention that they are social workers. So they are licensed social workers on that team that are able to get those connections with resources right away. We're also thinking about ways that we can enhance the internal experience in RTA. This was a chance for you to hear about what we're doing internally as well. And we're looking at things like childcare. We're looking at things like referral bonuses. Those are things that are not typical within the transit industry, but we're trying to revamp the way that we actually treat our internal customer as well as our external. Real quick, Rachel, how am I doing on time?
We're good. Hoping to move to questions soon.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Also, we're thinking about ways that we can move out into developing our relationships beyond just the buses and trains. So I wanted to mention too, some of the relationships we have with the school system. That might be something that you're considering as well. If you have students or family members that are thinking about riding the bus or the train, we work with internships. We work with Tri-C, our corporate college, all the time. We have development programs. We have internships. I probably need at least on average 20 new hires every couple days coming into our facility here. They're across the board. So if you have opportunity to be able to think about having a job with RTA or career, let us know. You'll see us in the blue blazers. That's actually the new uniform for the RTA recruitment staff. Also, we are making a commitment to the diversification of our leadership team. And also those folks that are not just making the decisions, but those folks that are actually operating the system. So if you have heard about ERGs, the employee resource groups, we have four new groups. One is for women, elevating women together. One is for the Latino community, Latinos Unidos. We also have veterans, and we also have the LGBTQ+. So those are just examples of ways that we're trying to strengthen our base here at RTA so that we can have a better experience with the external customer. One thing I did want to mention as well, because it might be something that comes up in the question, just thinking about how we actually play a part in that economic development I mentioned is important. So opportunities like Greyhound, right? That might come up as well. If you probably saw in the news, that was one of those experiences that we're trying to figure out how to actually move into the digital era from a mobility standpoint. So we're utilizing our opportunity of looking at all of the roster of places that we could potentially help offer locations for someone like Greyhound to actually move to so that we still have those connectivity options available is what we're doing. So basically, we're leveraging that real estate department I talked about to be able to look at our coffers and say, hey, here are the 4 or 5 options that we could offer to the city, the county, this particular vendor to say this is a particular drop-off location that might work. Now we have to work the political sector to find out what the OKs are and the approvals, but our main goal is to make sure that we can move innovative solutions and we can not be the inhibitor for progress. So all of the technology that's necessary, we're also moving in that direction. I want to stop for a moment because I'm sure you guys have questions and I don't want to just throw things at you. I'd rather ask the questions or answer the questions that you have that are more pointed. So I'm going to actually stop if that's okay, Rachel. And then if you've got questions, I'm more than happy to take it. If not, I can keep on going.
Yeah, no, this is great. We've had a few questions come in. So let's start with how will the real estate department feed into one-time and ongoing income sources for RTA, and if there have been any wins so far?
So that's a great question. Not sure who asked it, but as far as the real estate division, there have been some wins. We actually, excuse me, we're working on a couple projects. One being Maselli Dairy. I'll just mention that, and that's around the Ohio City area. That's one of those examples where we could use a small tract of property that's oddly shaped, that might only be, with under $50,000 to be able to help spur the growth and development and expansion of a dairy plant that might be able to hire up to 200 new employees because of that transaction. We started to think about where those monies go, right? So if we're able to sell off a small piece of property, where do we put that money? Does it go back into the capital budget? Does it, go to promote some new operating expense, or do we buy another tract of land? So we're working through trying to be a little more creative. Right now, it goes back into our capital budget so that it can create the funds for our capital backlog. I'll give you an example. When I first came to Cleveland, we were $500 million in arrears for capital expenditures. So we basically were down $500 million, right? So if you think about it like a credit card, you're $500 million in debt. You're not going to necessarily take on a new expense. You're not going to buy that new car, hopefully, if you got that much that you owe. So what we did about a couple of years ago is that we looked into debt defeasance programming. And that's something that typically does not, again, traditionally happen within transportation. But we have a great finance team. Raj Gotham is our CFO and has done wonders as far as taking and I'm laughing when I'm saying this because he came from the private side and has worked within transit for about 8 or 9 years. And it's great to be able to challenge how we do things that can be a little bit stodgy. We've got a lot of red tape, but there's always a way to work around it. So in short, we've looked at reversing some of our bonds and being able to pay down some of that debt. So instead of a $500 million backlog, we're closer to 200 million now, which still sounds like a lot. But if you think about the opportunities that that opens up, especially when we're looking at doing business with the DBE community, that's humongous. So we're able to take on more vendors, take on more projects so that we don't let things fall into disrepair because we don't have the money now. If we can start to pay down the debt that we have now, we can take on future state. Another quick thing, we were looking at a couple other projects that have a little bit more ROI. Columbus Road is one of those projects that we're looking to reissue to make sure that we can have a connectivity, right, between greenways and downtown on our rail system. We have a plethora of ideas and options. A lot of those we still have under contract, so I'm not at liberty to give the detail, but some of them also include apartment buildings that are being built on or adjacent to some of our stations. And then in those situations, we would offer a requirement, for example, of doing business with RTA to that potential developer and say, okay, anyone who purchases a condo, for example, or an apartment or rents an apartment within your building would automatically be enrolled in our Commuter Advantage program. And what does that mean? That means that you would get a pre-tax benefit of ridership, or you would immediately be enrolled in getting a monthly pass. That could be part of your rent. So that way we would go ahead and continue to pass it forward with overall ridership and public transportation investment. I hope that answered it.
So do you have any updates on the Pearl Road BRT project?
So I would say right now, I would actually decline answering that one because we're under communication for a lot of those. But I would say stay tuned. Over the next few months, we'll have a lot of updates. If you are able to tune in to our board meetings, that's something you may want to consider. I know board meetings aren't the sexiest of meetings, but we actually have a lot of things on the agenda. Just check the resolution list. And usually under the real estate and audit, I believe is where you'll see or either committee of the whole, you'll see some of those resolutions and it's clear as day. And then those are the conversations we have and updates for the real estate.
And can you describe your leadership style, specifically how you use those one-page issue briefs?
One page, if well, I hope you guys can kind of tell I'm a little loquacious. So we just had our what we call our DGM meeting, our Deputy General Manager meeting, probably about 30 minutes ago this morning. We always run over, right? Because I would say I like to debate. I don't view that as confrontational. As long as we can respect each other, I'm totally fine with arguing in an educated manner that gets to a solution. So I'm trying to encourage our team to be able to say, if you have a difference of opinion, it's okay. I'm not going to fire you if you don't agree with what I'm saying, but I will ask that you justify and have a reason for what you're saying, that you're not going off of a colloquial kind of storytelling history. We've always done it this way is what I hate to hear. So I think we've gotten past that. It's taken a little while. My predecessor was here for upwards of 20 years, very different management style, great in that administration, but we're going a little different direction. So I think the RTA team has, and I see a few of them on here as well. So hopefully, they'll check me if I'm not telling you the truth as soon as this is over. But I got asked this question actually 2 weeks ago on an interview with a candidate that asked, and I actually asked the team to answer it for me. And so it actually matched up with a lot of what I think. They called it flat, I think is what they called it, the management style, meaning that you have access to me, right? Meaning that we have access to each other. And we have to be able to work as a unit. One thing that I like to say is that we either succeed together or we fail together. I will try my best to be able to wear the team on my back and kind of take the hits, right? If you think about it in a sports analogy, the quarterback runs down the field and people have to block and get things out of his or her way, right? So if you think about I'm taking the issue on my back and I'm running down the field, we have to work together to make sure I can get to the end of the line. So if we can be able to get to that sequence of events and operating in a unit fashion, then I think we're golden and we're able to kind of get to that touchdown. But if we start to pick things and point and finger point, and I can't do this because so-and-so, couldn't make it happen, then at the end of the day, I'm going to ask, well, what happened to the communication, right? Why didn't you say something? My biggest pet peeve is not that you disagree with me, but that you didn't tell me you disagree with me, because I want to make sure that we're making a decision that we can all be invested in, even if we have bumps along the way. And I think we've actually had a lot of success in that regard, and that we also educate people along the way. So if I can, just really quickly, the legislative portion to how public transit is viewed is extremely important. Half of my family are educators. So if I weren't doing this, I probably would be in a school somewhere. I actually did it for a little while and I was sick every other week. So I said, well, maybe not. And I had fifth grade and kindergarten for a while at an ESL school in Chicago. But understanding that we have to explain to people and give them the information, whether it's a tax budget, whether it's investing in some policy that we have, whether it's Sherrod Brown or Matt Dolan, whoever it is, we've got to explain what our business case is and give them the information. I'm just finding a lot of people just don't know. And that's our fault for not being the education beacon to be able to let them have an informed decision. And then you get out of the isms. That doesn't even exist anymore. So hopefully that is the education style that I have. And really it's a classroom debate. That's probably my favorite course in school was the debate team. So if you've ever seen The Great Debaters, that kind of thing is how our how our meetings go. So they can be a little lengthy, but I think we get to a good spot.
Well, India, we said this was going to go really quickly. So unfortunately, we have hit our time. But thank you so much for sharing such a wide array of all of the initiatives and innovations that are happening with RTA. And we are thankful for you and your team and the leadership you bring to Cleveland.
Thank you. I'm so excited to have been a part of your afternoon. So I appreciate you. Thank you.